Well, there's a lot to talk about this morning, isn't there? For the past about 25 hours, I've been keenly following the developments in the Ruel Reid education scandal. And I call it that way because he is the one around which most of it is centered, and the most familiar name to most people having been a government minister. So the most senior person of those who have been charged. So I've been following the developments very, very keenly, and also trying to wrap my mind around it, because I knew that I had this segment to prepare for today. So I knew that I'd be expected to have an opinion. And I'm sitting there all of yesterday thinking, what do I think? What do I actually think about this situation, about the arrest and charge of Ruel Reid, as well as his wife and daughter, CMU President Professor Fritz Pinnock, and Mr. Lawrence there from St. Anne. So if you would have been following, you heard that multiple criminal charges were filed against all five yesterday afternoon after they were picked up in raids that began before dawn yesterday morning. So we have Ruel Reid, his wife and daughter, president of the CMU, Professor Fritz Pinnock, and JLP counselor for the Brownstown Division in Northwest St. Anne, Kim Brown Lawrence. And among the crimes that Reid is accused of committing are breaches of the Corruption Prevention Act and the Proceeds of Crime Act, POCA. He's also been charged with conspiracy to defraud. And similar charges were laid on his wife, Sharon, and his daughter, Sherelle, as well as Professor Pinnock. Councillor Brown Lawrence is accused of conspiracy to defraud and possession of criminal property. So after being picked up at their homes yesterday in raids that started before dawn, all five, I understand, spent the night in police lockup and remain there, as far as I know, until they are to attend court at 10 this morning. So certainly for us in the business of news, this is huge. This is a big story that we've been tracking for several months now. I think it's around March that the story broke, and our senior reporter Abka Fitzhenley has been on the case. Indeed, the entire newsroom has been tracking all the developments. So what do I actually think about what transpired yesterday? I have several thoughts, actually. First of all, I'm not one to celebrate people's downfall. But if you do wrong, and this is proven, I will celebrate justice. I do feel a little bit sorry for some of the people who've been caught up in this mess. I'm not sure what the extent of the participation of former Minister Reid's wife and daughter was. I don't know how old his daughter is, but I do feel a level of sympathy for them, depending on what comes out in when the trial takes place, if it gets to that point, and what the level of their complicity would have been. The biggest tragedy to me is Professor Fritz Pinnock, whom I've respected very much, who we've interviewed many times on this program because of his leadership of Caribbean Maritime University, formerly Caribbean Maritime Institute. We've all celebrated him as leader of that prestigious institute, now university, and under whose tenure that institute was elevated to a university. He's overseen the transformation of the institution into a world-class place of education, a place that is highly sought after by young people and not so young people also from Jamaica, from across the region, and even people from around the world, seeking out the skills that they can learn from Caribbean Maritime University that prestigious institution has to offer. The CMU, under Professor Pinnock, has become a center of innovation. I remember a few months ago reading about them winning one of the top prizes in robotics, for example, something that we as a nation aren't necessarily known for. We're not particularly known or celebrated for our work in the sciences, much less something like robotics. They were working on a robot that could collect garbage from under the sea. Brilliant. So really good work being done there at CMU under the leadership of Professor Pinnock. So I just really hate to see his career crash in this way. But if he's done wrong, then of course he has to pay the consequences and let the chips fall where they may. Now, as for former Minister Reid, the allegations are very damaging. And if proven to be true as well, I would like to see justice. Now, Reid's arrest is historic in the sense that only a handful of government ministers or former ministers in Jamaica's history have ever been arrested and charged for corruption. So one of the first reactions that I heard coming out yesterday was, people kissing them teeth, saying, been arrested, so what? Nothing is going to come out of it. Yeah, we all remember the current Spencer case. A big deal was made over him being arrested and charged in the Cuban light bulb scandal, only for him to be acquitted. So I understand certainly the skepticism that would exist among a large number of Jamaicans about this particular case, that nothing is going to come out of it. And that may well turn out to be the case. I can't look into the future. I don't have a crystal ball to predict what exactly is going to happen a few months from now, knowing our justice system, probably a few years from now before that case actually comes to trial, or those cases, because it's 5 persons who've been charged. I don't know how strong the evidence is that has been gathered. I do know that the FID and MOCA have been working on this for several months. They've been very meticulous in the way that they've gone about it, in collecting the evidence, in doing the interviews, and at times we in the public have been frustrated because we haven't been able to get the type of information that we've wanted to get in relation to any updates that may have been underway over the past few months. And you've heard the opposition, raise a hue and cry about it as recently as 2 days ago. But the authorities went about their work in what I believe to be a professional way, gathering the evidence, and now it has come to this point where they feel that they have enough to arrest and charge these 5 persons. And although in our history it is not common for a minister, a former minister, to be charged, I think that in itself says to us that we are making some strides in the anti-corruption fight. I asked my producer Cara this morning to help me, find what our history actually is in terms of how many times this has occurred. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, but what we found was only one conviction. Jag Smith in 1990, former JLP Minister of Labor and the Public Service. He was found guilty after being charged with receiving $70,000 in connection with some scandal at the time as well. There are a couple of other cases involving people connected with the government, but they weren't ministers. So you had Dr. Jephthah Ford. You would remember that case from a couple of years ago as well, but he wasn't a government minister. in the way that Ruel Reid was a government minister. He no longer is a minister. Of course, he was fired. But the allegations are for something or concern something that happened when he was a government minister. So I do believe that at least getting to this point is a step in the right direction for the fight against corruption, which we have been plagued with in the country's history. There's always been this keen sense that people in government have been corrupt, have been thieving the people's money. But there's been very little proof of that, solid proof that has resulted in arrest and charge. Like I mentioned, only Jag Smith has been convicted, and Jag Smith, Kern Spencer, and now Ruel Reid would make 3. If I'm correct, and like I said, you can correct me if I'm wrong, would make 3 the number of parliamentarians who've actually been arrested and charged. So it is historic in that sense, in the sense that he's one of just a handful of people, a handful of parliamentarians who's ever met this fate, getting to that level of being arrested and charged. But we await keenly to see what will come out of it. Will the evidence stand up in court? Will the allegations be proven to be true? And if so, we celebrate that day as a day of justice and a truly historic day in Jamaica's history. That's what's on my mind.